My periods were controlling my health, my relationships, and honestly, my whole life. But everything began to change when I finally surrendered them to Christ. Welcome to Cause of Our Joy. I'm Elizabeth. And today I want to share how God completely transformed my life, starting with something as painful and as personal as my periods. Because if you're watching this, I believe that He might be getting ready to intervene in your life too. My period started giving me trouble when I was about 14 and entering high school. At first, it was just uncomfortable, but over time, it started feeling like a dull soreness over my body during my cycles. And then came PMS, symptom after symptom. I'd lose my appetite, my stomach would become really sensitive, and I would feel my energy just drain. At 16, I had what I thought was a period for 2 months straight. And my mom was baffled, so she took me to her OBGYN. And when I sat down and explained everything, he listened, then offered me birth control. But thankfully, I had already done my research and I knew that birth control wasn't a real solution. It was more like putting a Band-Aid on a gushing wound. And as a Catholic Christian specifically, I knew that birth control was against what the church teaches about the sanctity of life and marriage. So I said no. And he looked at me and just said, "You'll just have to suffer then." At 16, I remember thinking, is this what the rest of my life is going to be like? But then I remembered who was in control. And I really believe that God gave me the grace to double down in faith and say no to the wrong thing so that I could say yes to the right thing. Okay, so fast forward to college, and my cycles went from bad to worse. The bleeding was heavier, the cramping became unbearable, and my digestion was so bad around my cycles that it usually just felt better if I didn't eat at all. I couldn't even keep water down in the worst day. My PMS started coming a whole week before my cycles did, and it brought friends. Headaches, tenderness, diarrhea, and constipation, insomnia, fatigue, and my favorite, irritability. It felt like my body was really just turning against me. A friend of mine who also struggled with her cycles went with me to see a family doctor who practiced NAPRO technology, if you're familiar with that. And after a few months of charting my symptoms, I was referred to a specialist who suspected that it was endometriosis. And I was nervous, but I had the surgery. And I was so sure that surgery would, like, bare minimum, fix my problems and be my miracle, the miracle I'd been looking for. And after the surgery, they told me, give it a few cycles. Your body remembers the pain. So your first few cycles may be painful. So I waited. 6 months later, still the same pain. A year later, way worse. Now my symptoms were lasting up to 3 weeks out of the month. I spent my senior year mostly alone because I was too tired to work as hard as I wanted to, and I was too tired to socialize, and frankly, I just felt emotionally unstable. Every morning, I woke up feeling like I had physically been hit by a bus. And during my worst days, I'd come back to my dorm and lay on my exercise mat in fetal position and just tremble until the cramps passed. Now, my now husband was the only person that I confided in about this. And we were engaged and looking at our future and wondering, if my cycles are like this, what will my pregnancies be like? And I had to ask the question because I was always kind of afraid from a young age that I would never be able to become a mother. And that's what I'd always wanted more than anything. And I was at a point where I was actually asking, can I become a mother? Can I take care of kids? Can I conceive? And that's when I started running to God, because honestly, it was the only thing that was really keeping me from falling into despair. There was a little adoration chapel not far from campus, and I spent countless nights there begging God for help, fighting tears, and journaling. And I found an old entry that said, I'm afraid to look forward. I'm scared to look back. Who am I becoming? Will I be worth anything at all? And through all of this prayer, God was silent, but He wasn't absent. And He wasn't ignoring me. He was just preparing my heart for something really good. After graduation, I couldn't find a job. And I went back to that same chapel again. And on the way, I told Jesus, all right, I'm sitting in the back. I give up. You need to find me a job in the next hour, which looking back was like so bold. But God also loves specific prayers. So about 10 minutes before I left, my now mother-in-law texted me a screenshot of an opportunity that she'd seen in the newspaper. And it said, be part of a company that feeds 30,000 children a day. And something in me just knew. I called immediately and met with the woman who had posted it. She told me all about the company, but more specifically, it's epigenetic nutrition that had transformed her cycles along with a whole list of other issues. And I thought, okay, Lord, this has to be it, right? And I already knew that nutrition in our current world was so depleted. And she explained that if I could fill those gaps, my body might finally be able to heal. So within 1 month of filling my nutrient gaps, I could eat foods that I hadn't been able to eat in years. 3 months later, my chronic back injury, which kept me from sitting for more than like 20 minutes at a time, disappeared. 6 months in, my PMS symptoms were no longer controlling my life. And God was there laying the groundwork. A year later, I placed First Nation with that same company and earned a bonus check. And I wanted to use it for LASIK because I've always wanted to be glasses free when I became a mother, which clearly worked out, right? So I started taking a product that I'd heard a lot of people getting great results with their eyesight with. And just 1 week into using it, I turned to my husband and I said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I feel a shift in my womb. The next month, I had my very first textbook perfect cycle, the first one in my life. And 5 years later, aside from my pregnancies, that's all I've had. No more heavy bleeding, no more crippling cramps, no more exhaustion and fatigue and nausea or emotional instability, which, by the way, my husband said, for the emotional stability alone, I would never be allowed to stop taking it. But through God's grace, more importantly, I have been able to have 2 healthy pregnancies. And now I get to be fully present with my babies as a mom, which is more than I ever thought was possible before. And yeah, it's still hard being a wife and a homemaker and a mom of 2 toddlers, but I don't break so easily anymore. And I thank God every single day that He led me to the solution. So after my healing, I started researching why exactly I'd gotten such great results. And it turns out that the real culprit wasn't endometriosis. It was hormonal imbalance. And my cycles were just a symptom of the deeper problem. No doctor had ever explained that to me, and I'd seen plenty. But God was able to open my eyes and my heart to the truth. So if you've been praying for answers to your painful periods like I was, your fatigue, your emotional ups and downs, your fear, just know that He hears you. And He's preparing your heart for something greater than you've ever imagined. If you're ready to talk, I want to help you, sister. My mission is to help women overcome hormonal imbalance so that they can create happier and holier homes for their families, like I've had the opportunity to do myself through God's grace. And I want to leave you with this verse from the letter of James, chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, which is, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, consider them nothing but joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete and lacking in nothing. Whatever trial you're in right now, God's not wasting it. He's writing your story of hope and healing and holiness. Until next time, toodles.